I'll give you guys a tip. I do this every single day, literally. After I get up, after I meditate, after I pray, after I work out, the very first thing I do when I start my day is I check every bank account I have for myself personally and the businesses, and I check every credit card. I've been doing that for years. You'd be surprised how many times. Normally it takes, a couple minutes, but the number of times that I found something that I'm like, hey, wait, what is this? Sometimes it's good. Sometimes there's a deposit that's early. Sometimes I'm like, hey, what is this charge on this credit card? What it does is it also makes you keenly aware of your cash flow when it comes in and when it comes out. It's easy to catch things. I've had a bank deposit out of the blue, mistakenly deposit, and then I've had them withdraw 3 times that amount to correct the mistake. Not good on either one. You wake up and you're like, wait a minute, what's all this money? Where did this deposit come? You think, oh, this is great. But then you realize you can't do anything with it because you're going to go to jail. So when you try and correct, but see, I was able to call them that day and say, hey, you guys just made a huge deposit in my account. I don't know where it's from or what it's for. I just wanted to alert you. Then when they withdrew 3 times the amount, I knew that immediately as well. The same is true with your credit cards. I check mine every single day. Why do I check it? Because it's becoming increasingly easy for people to get your credit card and charge something. Another thing that I do at the beginning of every year is I change my credit card. I just call and say, hey, send me a new card. I lost it. And they'll change it. That starts to get rid of all those lingering subscriptions that are out there. And then in January, I'll get a nice email, hey, your credit card didn't go through. We need a new one. Then I can decide whether or not I still want to pay for Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu, and 15 other channels that I don't watch. And so everyone's in that same business, but having a business and a financial process is very important. And it doesn't matter how big you get. I recommend that you keep doing that basic thing over and over. That's going to tell you what's going on with your finances. And that's the reason that's the reason why we are in this game, is to build our finances and our wealth up.
What are the top 5 indicators of wealth in America?
The number 1 indicator of wealth in America from an economist standpoint is marriage. Are you married or not? The number 2 indicator is, do you own a home? The number 3 indicator is, do you invest in any stocks? Do you have any investments in stocks? The number 4 indicator is, do you have savings? And the number 5 is, do you have a market skill that can command, a marketable skill that can command a reasonable to high dollar amount, in the marketplace to get paid? Would you like to know the 5 things that as a community we lack? Number 1, majority of in our community, we used to be the most married demographic of any ethnicity in America. Up until 1965, we were like 10 or 20 points ahead of every other demographic: white, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever. That has changed. Now we're the least. We're the least homeowners. We don't own homes. We don't own stocks. We don't have savings. The average American cannot cover $400. And as a mass group, we do not have the marketable skills. So when you look at the difference in wealth, homeownership is number 2 on that from an economist standpoint. Here's the irony is, there have been people who've died millionaires who've never made a lot of money. It's because they did the first 4. They saved, they invested in stocks, they bought a home, and they were married. So as you're talking to people, we have to start spreading that home ownership is the pathway to wealth. The only people who aren't complaining when people say, oh, well, houses cost so much. I'm like, yeah. They're like, well, that's a problem. Not if you own a house. The only people I hear complaining about the price of houses are people who don't own property. As a property owner, when I hear that there are high prices, I'm like, hey, that's great. Is there any disagreement on that? The only people you hear complaining about the cost of housing are people who don't own houses. Everyone who owns a house is happy that their house is worth a lot of money. That's key. For those people who are looking at the interest rates, I'm just going off on a little tangent. 25 years ago, I bought my house. Interest rates were 7 to 8%. I got 6.78% as an interest rate. That was an outstanding interest rate. And then I refinanced it down to 3%. I got the house I wanted, got the interest rate that was the best for the time, and as soon as a better one was available, I refinanced it down to 3%. People can do the same thing today. So in organizing your business, you also have to identify your target client and your target message. So here's the thing. Most of our real estate agents sell, if I say, hey, who do you sell to? They say, I sell to everyone, every and anyone. If you sell to every and anyone, that's hard. Every company, every product, every service has a niche. They have a target client that they're looking for. So as an example, Emmerich built his business in the beginning solely out of airmen relocating to the Andrews Air Force Base. That was his target niche. Airmen relocating to the Andrews Air Force Base who didn't want to live on base. Now, since I'm not in the Air Force, guess who he doesn't have to compete against? His niche, because he was in the Air Force and he had connections on base to connect with the people there and get referrals from the on-base housing department, he had a leg up in terms of developing his entire business out of that niche. You got to figure out what your niche is. You have to figure out who's around you. Who do you naturally talk to? And what are those people doing as it relates to real estate? And so one of the things that I encourage you to do is sit down and look at the demographics surrounding you right now. I'll use myself as an example at two different time periods in life. When I first moved, when we first opened Keller Williams, I was 35, that was somewhere around 35. I had 3 kids under the age of 5 years old. And so I had bought my house. Everyone I knew had kids, everyone I knew was married, and they were looking to buy their family house, like that step up out of the townhouse or condo into a real house. So it would be very easy for me to market to people with young children because everyone I ran into had young children. When I went to church, young children, we had kids Sunday school, we had kids gymnastics, music lessons, ice skating, football, basketball, etc. I saw people with young children all day long, every day. Never met anybody retiring, didn't meet people at that point talking about doing real estate as investment other than a dream. It was primarily people who were getting married and had young children. Why do I tell you that? Because you can build $1 million business out of just that demographic if that's who you are surrounded by. You have to figure out who you're surrounded by and what the message to them is. Today I'm 56. I don't know anybody having any young children. Everybody I know is an empty nester. Everybody I know is talking about retirement, investing in a second home, a beach home or a mountain home, investing in real estate. So I would create my target messaging and my target market around those people. There's $1 million worth of business in those people. I'm the same person at 2 different points in time, and my people around me are at 2 different points in time, 2 different messages. The easiest way to drive business in 2024 is figure out who's sitting right around you and what they're wanting to do. I had this conversation with an agent years ago, and I said, well, who's around you? And she said, well, primarily single women. I said, what are they talking about? She said, men. I said, what are they talking about besides men? She said, they're all waiting to, there's some that have never been married. They're waiting to buy a house until they get married. And then there are some who are getting divorced and they're scared to buy a house because they don't know what the future brings. And so she was going to a woman's retreat. And I said, hey, as they're talking about different things, just bring up real estate. Bring up real estate as it relates to what they're talking about. She went to a woman's retreat. It hadn't dawned on her to start talking to the people right in her inner circle about real estate. And she went there. And for those who were wanting to be married, but had been long single, she talked to them about, well, maybe you should buy a house anyway now. And when you get married and find the husband, then you can buy a second house and use this as a rental property. For those who are getting divorced, she said, hey, don't hold out too long. Go ahead and jump in and let's start looking now so you can figure out what you need in divorce versus what you needed or wanted in marriage. And she walked away with 8 leads that ended up, I think she got 4 or 5 deals, if I recall correctly, out of that. And so you can have those conversations with people in your immediate circle. I've had 7 sales, 7 referrals, just based on people who are empty nesters. Just me telling them, hey, yeah, I sold the big house and got a condo. And started just talking to them about that, just casually, as we're just talking, because it's a normal part of the conversation. There's acres and acres of diamonds right under your feet, but the first thing you have to do is identify who your target client is, and you have to be specific.